without further ado, let's get started. Okay, again, my name is Andy Steves. I had the blessing and the curse of growing up with this guy, Rick Steves, also a hometown boy, my entire life. So, every time we would go over to Europe, my mom and my sister and I would join him. He would go over about Easter time and stay over till August. We'd go over to Europe to just break up those long family trips. And he took it upon himself to teach me how to travel from a very early age. So what that means, for example, is he would put me on the next metro car, tell me where to change and where to get off, and then he'd be like, all right, see you on the other end. And this is when I was like 7 or 8 years old. So when I say I'm happy to be here, I really am happy to be here speaking to you about good travel. We played everything from grumpy teenagers on his TV show to even a Swiss Santa Claus here. So funny side note here about the Swiss Christmas tradition. The Swiss Santa Claus, Samichlaus, actually has an evil sidekick named Schmutzli. Right here, with this mean-looking black cape and that beard and those branches strapped to his waist. Well, the funny story about this is the Swiss children believe that if they're a bad kid, Schmutzli will come in the middle of the night, throw you into that burlap sack right there, and beat you with those sticks that are tied to his waist. So needless to say, the Swiss children are very well behaved. They take care of their chores, do what they're told, all that good stuff. So that was 0 to 18 years of my life, going abroad to Europe, traveling with the family. I graduated from Meadowdale High School in 2005, and me and my best friend started backpacking around Europe for 6 weeks on a classic backpacking trip. But then I got the chance to study abroad during my junior year at the University of Notre Dame, and that opened up a completely new continent to me. For the first time, I was able to actually engage with the local culture. Rather than moving on, I arrive and then I'm moving on to the next city day after tomorrow, I actually got to stay put for 4 months in one place, and that was incredible. It was a special experience, and I'll never forget it. But it really opened my eyes to there's such a serious need for travelers going to Europe to know not only how to get around, but also how to bring the right mindset to really make the most of their time abroad. And that's what studying abroad opened my eyes to. When I graduated from Notre Dame in 2010, I started a tour company, and that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. So that's kind of just a little bit about my background. I don't want to talk too much about me. I want to talk all about you guys and your exciting upcoming travels to Europe. My semester abroad really gave me a chance to begin developing my own travel philosophy. And good, redeeming travel isn't rocket science. It's actually really pretty simple. It's all about knowing how to get around. That's the logistics part of that. That means how to find good accommodation, how to not waste time standing in lines at museums, how to find cheap flights, all of that good stuff. But that's only half the equation. The other half is bringing that right mindset. When it comes to travel, you have to be ready to go with the flow. You have to be able to embrace those unexpected experiences. You have to get past, being American traveling in Europe. You should be a temporary local, And so this idea might sound a little bit familiar if you guys have heard my dad speak, but I've layered along all the benefits of modern mobile technology that everybody's using these days and how to maximize your time, budget, and fun while you're traveling around Europe with mobile technology. So that's what we're going to get into today. And for the purposes of this talk, what I've done is I've kind of designed a hypothetical adventure through Europe, and I want to talk about a handful of my favorite cities and also how you can save money and maximize your time through that process. So right out of the gate, the biggest opportunity that you have to save money while you're traveling is if you pick your right long-haul flights. That means the big flight over from Seattle, SeaTac, over to Europe. That's where smart travelers can save a good deal of money right out of the gate. And there's a number of different factors that you should be paying attention to. Smart travelers really bring in the idea that, okay, it's not about when I can go, it's about when the cheapest flights are. Be open to any sort of cheap flight that's out there, even if it's not getting you straight to the destination you want, because guess what? There's really cheap, quick regional connections as soon as you touch down in the main European airport hubs like Frankfurt or London or Amsterdam. I always keep my long-haul flight search completely wide open on dates as well as destination, because I know that as soon as I touch down in London or Amsterdam, there are multiple multiple flights a day to any other destination all around Europe. And if you have the luxury of flexible dates, look, across a range of dates rather than just one date going there and one date coming back. Because you never know, it might be several $100s cheaper if you were to go the day before you intended to go rather than being fixed on a certain day when you're shopping around. Google Flights is amazing. Google, Alphabet owns all these different apps now. Well, Google Flights is an incredible tool where you can keep it as open, as flexible as possible. Check this out, Seattle to all of Europe. So that means it's going to search all the different airports that have flights going into them. And you can even search by, interest rather than a particular destination. My sister would go straight to the beaches, but for me, maybe I'm looking for alpine sports or outdoor adventures or you name it. That way, Google Flights will give you all sorts of results that you don't even know might exist. So definitely worth checking out there. And they'll give you ideas on different destinations that you might not even be aware of that are out there. So Google Flights is one, and Hopper is another sweet app that I use all the time. And just for the purposes of this talk again, I took a screenshot for flights going from Seattle to Amsterdam. And as you can see, June, July, and August, the high season, are very expensive. And then very quickly, it visually represents that flights are much cheaper in September and October. So again, just a couple apps, just a couple websites to begin to do your long-haul flight search, all right? And once you get over to Europe, these are the handful of cities that I selected for us to get around. So let's talk about Amsterdam, Rome, Barcelona, Prague, Edinburgh. And of course, it makes a lot more sense rather than going back and forth around the continent to organize your adventure in a way that makes geographic sense. So what's really important is not only to value your money, but of course your time. And you can save time by doing your trip in a way that makes geographical sense along the way. We're going to start off in Edinburgh, the town of J.K. Rowling and of course the Harry Potter. An incredible city. It's an old medieval city with a castle up on top of a rock with the Royal Mile that descends from the castle to the palace with all sorts of really cool shops and everything in between with these tight medieval lanes. And of course it's the land of haggis. So when you're going to a city that you've never been to, check this out. What I do is I cast my net as wide as possible. I'm looking at all sorts of different media by which I can collect information for the place I'm going to. I do that for every city that I'm going to. I begin with, of course, guidebooks and printed resources. I look at crowdsourced websites like TripAdvisor and Yelp, and I also look at magazines and current publications that might be focused more on current events, music festivals. There's all sorts of websites out there that talk about the exciting current events that are happening that a guidebook will never have. Let's start off with crowdsourced websites, okay? There's tons of guidebooks out there like my dad's and like my own, my new one now, There's Only Planet, but it's so hard to kind of cut through all of these different information pieces that are out there. And crowdsourcing is just one more resource that you're gonna have to cut through in order to do your research as well. What I'm looking for is collective intelligence. Because as we know, anybody can get on Yelp or TripAdvisor and say anything they want about anything, regardless of authority on the subject, regardless on experience. And so what I did was I took a screenshot in order to illustrate this point. I'm always looking for collective intelligence. What I mean by that is kind of the best combination of quantity and quality of reviews. So take a look at Table for 10. Looks like it's off to a great start with 5 stars, yeah? But check out the number of reviews that they have, 8 reviews. So for all I know, that could be the friends and family of the person who started the restaurant, right? I would put my money on the restaurant that follows it, as a much more consistently quality and positive experience. Because it might have, 4.5 stars instead of 5, but it has 216 reviews. So I know that their food's gonna be fresh. I know that they're, used to dealing with a lot of people. So that's where I would get started. And keep in mind that, when you're going through these amazing European cities, it's your one chance to see and experience the cuisine, see the city, experience the culture. And so you have one chance to do that, so do it right. Don't just wander and see if you can't find a place that's good. Find a place that's really good, out of the gate. And what I want to encourage you guys to do, you're not going to be able to do that every single step along the way, but what you can do is work on recognizing touristy restaurants. If they have 10, languages of menus on their front door, that's a safe way to assume that that's probably going to be a touristy restaurant. The more neon signs it has, touristy restaurant. If it has pictures representing the meal, probably a touristy restaurant. Whereas if you go down a safe-looking side street and around a safe-looking corner and find a mom and pop shop that depend on the quality of their food, fairness of their prices, quality of their service, you're going to find those places that are much more local and probably cheaper. It'll save you money along the way. And TripAdvisor is a great place to start your research, but keep in mind that, if you're looking at the top 10 things on there rated by thousands and thousands of people, you're going to stay very much on the beaten tourist track. There's nothing wrong with that, in and of itself, but remember, that's a great place to start your research, kind of check those sites off the list, but then I love to get off the beaten path. I do those as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and then I'm there to really experience the living culture of each of these cities along the way. Yelp is another great way to do research, especially for nightlife and restaurants. And the cool thing is it organizes your results geographically as well. Just like we're talking about making your line through Europe in a way that makes geographical sense, it makes a lot of sense to do the same thing within a city. Focus on a neighborhood in one day with all your sites and restaurants that you're going to go to in that neighborhood, and then move on to the next neighborhood the next day. So organize your time within the city as well as efficiently as possible. Time Out is a great resource for those who are interested in knowing what's going on a day-to-day basis in any one of the major European cities across the continent. Time Out is originally from London, but now it has editions, magazines, and website resources for all the cities across Europe. So that's a great place to get started if you like music events especially. So, did anybody take the bus here this morning by chance? Nice, okay. Don't worry, I didn't either. I drove down here. I should have rode my bike. But, we're Americans. Our entire society is based off of roads and gas, right, and cars. Well, in Europe, I've rented a car maybe 4 or 5 times in my lifetime going around Europe. Public transportation is the way to go, especially local public transportation. And the good news is all of these public transportation systems, whether it's in Edinburgh, Paris, London, or Rome, all have apps that'll tell you exactly where your bus is. It'll tell you the route and where your bus is coming from, where it's going. It really makes getting around local towns much, much easier than trying to navigate off of the incomplete paper maps that they have at bus stops. So the good news is whether it's trams, buses, metros, there's apps out there that'll help you make the most of your time in order to get around town. Uber as well is another resource that works really well. I know it's a little bit controversial, but that way there's no money exchanging hands. I've dealt with taxi issues in a dozen cities across Europe. The good news is that with Uber, the rate's definitely fair and there's no money changing hands. You're not going to get shortchanged or anything like that. So something to consider as well. Now, so that was Edinburgh. We're going to make our way over to Amsterdam, one of my favorite cities. But let's talk about how to get there first, okay? Basically, you have 3 choices: busing it, training it, and planing it. I work a lot with students, and so by default, what they do is they value their money and they don't value their time. I see this happen all the time. They'll go for a bus ride that'll take 14 hours to get from Rome to Prague to save $20 over a flight from going from Rome to Prague. And guess what? That's 14 hours to get there, an uncomfortable night and a bad night's sleep in order to save $20 when they could have got there and spent 10 more hours experiencing that city. And so really, value both your time and your money when you're considering your options. That's the first thing to consider. Buses makes sense in certain countries and different regions, especially I've had good experiences in Central Europe. So that's where I tend to use buses, but not many other places to get from city to city. Trains, I use sbb.ch. That's a Swiss website that breaks down all the different timetables. It's Swiss, so it darn near always works, and it'll tell me the good information. I use that to estimate my time en route and departure time and options, and then I'll go directly to the train station to actually purchase the ticket, because when you're traveling, you never know what sort of discounts might be out there, what sort of student discounts, or you name it, that might apply to you that you might not be aware of. But let's talk about planes and budget flights, because that's what most of us are going to get around on in Europe, okay? Everybody's heard about Ryanair, right? Everybody's heard about Ryanair because they screw over the most customers so they get the most press. It's a very interesting marketing plan, but it seems to work for them. I run my business in a different way, but it works great for Ryanair, it seems. Never search just with Ryanair or any one airline to get started. I always do my search at Skyscanner, Cheapaware, and Kayak first. And again, I keep my flights search as open and as flexible as possible. Because again, you never know what sort of options might pop up that you might not be considering. And then when I find the flight that I do like, I'll book directly with that airline. And let me tell you why. Because I was doing this talk in London, and a student came up to me and showed me this screen. She booked her flight through eDreams, and she received an email after the fact that said, hey, by the way, that flight that you booked with us, the price went up. So if you still want to come, let me know. It's just going to be 25 more euros. And I prefer to skip that headache personally. And so what I do is I just book directly with the airline. Now, when it comes to Ryanair and budget airlines, you got to read every single bit of fine print because they mean it and they'll hold you to it, okay? So let's go through Ryanair. If you don't check in online ahead of time and you try to check in at the airport, that's 40 euros. If you try to check in a bag and you don't do it online ahead of time, that's 40 or 50 euros. And if you have to print out your boarding pass, just the piece of paper to get you on the plane, again, 40 or 50 euros. And because we're flying from Edinburgh to Amsterdam, guess what? We're paying pounds. Same number, different currency, 30% more expensive, all because you didn't do those things ahead of time. In order to get past that, just check in online ahead of time, print out your boarding pass ahead of time, pay for your bag online ahead of time, and you'll be all right. But they really stick it to unorganized travelers. So if you can keep your stuff straight, if you can stay organized, if you can do all that stuff ahead of time, you'll be just fine. One thing about Ryanair and other budget airlines is they will say that you're flying from, say, Paris to Barcelona. Well, what they mean is on Ryanair, you're going to fly from Beauvais, which is a regional airport about an hour and a half or 2 hours outside of Paris, and you're going to fly to Girona, which is a regional airport about 2 hours outside of Barcelona. And they do that to save on airport taxes and fees, and to give you, the consumer, a cheaper price. But you might have a flight from Paris to Barcelona that might be 10 or 15 euros cheaper, at the beginning. But if you flew with British Airways, you'd be paying 15 more euros, but you wouldn't have to pay the 20 euro bus ride out to the airport from Paris and into Barcelona from Girona. So again, bring that big picture approach when you're evaluating all of your options to get from point A to point B. I got a story for you. So I was flying with Ryanair last year, and I paid for my bag ahead of time, printed out my boarding pass, checked in online ahead of time. I was like, all right, I got this Ryanair thing down. I'm good to go. Well, I was checking in, left my bag, and the check-in desk put the baggage claim sticker over this right here. So I didn't read that. Security didn't read it. I got to the gate, waited in line to get to the front of the line, and the lady there is like, no, you didn't get your visa or passport checked, so you need to go back to the holding area. We're going to get you a security guard to get you through security. You're going to get a stamp, and then we'll try and get you on the flight. And the gate was closing in about 10 minutes, so I knew how slim these chances were. So I booked it across the airport to get to the holding area to wait for my security guard to walk me back through. And the lady at the information desk there was like, no, I see this happen all the time. Ryanair will bump you off of a 30 euro flight on this technicality and then charge you 300 euros to get on the next one. I was like, I'm not having any of this. So I reached across the table and grabbed a pen and scribbled a signature, and it worked. But don't be forging signatures in airports. That's a very bad idea. Just get your visa and passport checked before you go through security. It's just a stamp that they, just one more hoop that they make you jump through in order to get on those cheap flights. But yeah, when you're doing your searches, when you're buying your flights, when you're buying your train tickets and making your accommodation reservations, TripIt is an excellent resource to keep all of that information in one place. I have such a hard time digging through my emails in order to find a flight confirmation. Instead, when you set up an account, you just forward your confirmation email straight to plans@tripit.com. It senses what email it's coming from, and then it populates your flight information all in one place. So you have your departure time, you have your airport, you have your terminal, you have your confirmation number, all of that in one place, and even better, it's offline. So you don't have to worry about data or Wi-Fi or anything like that. So that really helps to just keep everything organized in one place, and it's free. Kind of going along the same lines of flights, but shifting more towards budget and money tips now. One thing that I'm seeing happen all the time now, it used to be every once in a while a few years ago, but now it's all the time, is the option to pay in your home currency, US dollars, rather than the local currency. That's always a bad deal. Not only is it a bad deal, but you're also paying 3.5% just for this service. So I took a screenshot in order to illustrate this point. I was buying a Aer Lingus flight, another Irish budget airline company flight, and the flight was about 100 euros up here. So I knew that that day the euro was trading to the dollar at about $1.23 or so, not 139. So just in order to see this $141 amounts, I was paying another 20 bucks, rather than just paying in the local currency. So always opt to pay in euros, pounds, francs, forints, whatever they might be, always pay in the local currency rather than your home currency. You might have that reaction to just instantly just pay in your home currency, but always pay in the local currency anytime you use your card, anytime you're given that option, and insist on it, because a lot of times you'll be handed the receipt to sign, but it says you've been given a choice when you actually haven't been. So be sure to insist on paying in the local currency rather than the home currency. This is all pretty straightforward. My dad used to travel with traveler's checks, but that's kind of a thing of the past. I never exchange money ever. I always just go to the closest, safest, most legit looking ATM I can find in the airport, and I'll pull out the local currency straight away, and then I'll go buy a bottle of water or a Snickers in order to break the big bills to have some change for the bus or metro to get into town. That's the best way for me to get local currency as soon as I touch down. And another kind of side tip that I love to do is before I ever leave the security area of an airport, like so at the baggage claim, I just pull off my side all my stuff to the side and get organized a little bit, especially if you're going into Italian cities, Spanish cities, and anywhere there are pickpockets. You're going to be going into town on, that's the main line into the city for all the bewildered tourists, so it makes a lot of sense for pickpockets to exist on those lines, right? So what I like to do is I take all of my valuable stuff that I know I'm not going to need between now and the hostel or hotel that I'm going to check into, and put that at the bottom of my very close bag that I'm going to hold tight, and then any valuable stuff that I know I am going to need, like maybe 10 or 20 bucks, maybe my phone, but that's about it, I keep at the top of the bag that I keep really close. That way you're not fumbling through all sorts of different cash, cards, and other valuable items out in the public. As soon as you go outside of the security area, then it's a different story. So just keep that in mind. And XE is an excellent website and app that gives me real-time exchange rates throughout Europe. Because if you make it over to Central Europe, you're going to be holding these bills that might say 200,000 on it, and you might be wondering, is that enough for a car or a beer? You don't know. So it really helps to have a list of different currencies so that you're being sure that there's not an extra zero tagged on to your dinner bill. So now we've touched down in Amsterdam. They like to think of themselves now as the Seattle of Europe. But no, it's a beautiful city with canals, the most delicious apple pie that you can imagine. You have stroopwafels, which are like these cookies sandwiching warm syrup, sugary goodness. It is so good. And of course, land of tulips. So Amsterdam is an absolutely beautiful city. I love to check it out. I have a couple bikes locked to a random light pole outside of the city center. And so anytime I come back into town, I unlock them, pump up the tires, and get on my way. It's my home away from home. I love it. And, going to these amazing European cities, there's so many more people traveling around Europe. What that means is the number of tourists traveling through Europe is going exponential right now, but the main tourist sites are staying pretty much static. There's one Anne Frank house in Amsterdam, there's one Van Gogh museum, there's one Heineken experience, but there's many, many more travelers coming through. And so you're seeing lines all over the place now. And this is the line outside the Anne Frank house. And you can stand in that line for 3 or 4 hours of your 2 days in town, or what you can do is spend 10 minutes on the website and make a reservation and skip that line. And so it's really up to you. I know a lot of travelers who value flexibility and spontaneity higher than their time standing in line, but that's a question that you're going to have to answer, because obviously as soon as you make a reservation somewhere, you're pegged or at least committed to that time entry slot. And so it's up to you whether or not you want to make that reservation, but I would recommend it, especially for the 2 or 3 key sites in each city: the Colosseum in the Vatican, the Eiffel Tower, and the Louvre, Anne Frank House and Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. That really saves you hours upon hours of standing in line. And again, place real value not just on your money, but your time as well. So keep that in mind. And they do things a little bit differently in Amsterdam. You're going to see funny plants going on the side of the streets. You're going to see very public restrooms. And you're going to see the red light district, okay? Unfortunately, so many tourists never venture beyond the kind of the dirty city center of Amsterdam. And as a consequence, it's so easy to just be focusing on the fact that marijuana is decriminalized and sex working is protected and regulated and in your face in the center of Amsterdam. Now, it's so easy to just kind of stay on the surface level reaction of saying this is good, this is weird, I agree with this or I disagree with this. You know, if that's what you're doing, if that's what you find yourself reacting or how you're reacting, that's fairly surface level. What I want to encourage everybody here to get a little bit deeper than that and understand why things are the way they are in these different countries and cultures. And the Dutch have just found it more pragmatic and more practical to not legislate morality, but rather, you know, tax and regulate those activities and put that money back into healthcare systems, infrastructure, education systems, and safety nets to get people out of difficult situations if they find themselves in it. What you'll find is that the Dutch people smoke less than anybody else in the world, and sex workers are protected, they're unionized, and they are not controlled by anyone else. It doesn't really matter if we agree with it or not. It's not our place as travelers to come in and judge, but rather, if you keep your mind open, you can then take those real world lessons that you pick up around the world and then come back to the States and explain and have real life experiences to back up whatever beliefs that you do have. And I think that's so important, especially in this day and age, to understand rather than just draw a line and say you're there and I'm here. You know, so keep that in mind while you're traveling through Europe. Don't worry, I know it's early on a Saturday morning. That's as political as we're going to get today. Let's head on over to Prague, the Golden City, the city of 1,000 spires. All right, this is actually my home away from home. This is where I live when I'm over in Europe running the show for my tour company, Weekend Student Adventures. It's absolutely beautiful. This is the Charles Bridge here, and it's straddling the Vltava is the river that goes through town, and the architecture is amazing. It's like this Gothic, stark architecture, but it also has world-famous Baroque churches and all sorts of fascinating architecture because it wasn't actually bombed out in World War II. So if you're watching a movie that's supposed to take place in old world Europe, it's probably filmed in Prague because it's the city that looks the oldest. And of course, the land of beer. It's cheaper than water. It actually is. There's been tests. You go around into restaurants. Beer is definitely going to be cheaper than bottled water. So let's use Prague as a chance to talk about accommodation. For me, I started out traveling in hostels. I love hostels still. I love the social aspect of it. There's tons of other hostel booking websites out there, but Hostelworld has recently bought them all. So I just like to go to the source and book through hostelworld.com. And forget everything that the movie taught you. Hostels are fun, and they're safe, and they're clean. They're beautiful. This is a shot of the hostel that we use in Prague on my tours. You know, so this is an 8-bed dorm, but check it out. Each of these little bed pods has their own charging station, reading light, and locking locker. I love staying in hostels because I find that the social interaction I have while staying in them is so much fun, and it really adds to the backpacking experience. And what you'll find is that many hostels these days have taken a handful of rooms and turned them into private rooms, so private twins, doubles, triples. And so if you like the social aspect of staying in a hostel, but you don't want to listen to other people snore, a private room in a hostel is a great budget option for you. And you know, this looks like a nice hotel even, doesn't it? So this is where I stay as well in Prague if I'm, or any other city, in private rooms in the hostels we stay in. That's kind of a great middle ground. Alternatively, I found Airbnb to be a great resource for me to stay in an apartment where I have my own kitchen, I have Wi-Fi, I have a place to work, and it's safe, and immediately it connects me with a local host. I've had great experiences all around the world with Airbnb. You can choose between a shared room, a private room, or an entire apartment or house. So this is St. Nicholas Church. This is just at the end of Prague. I have picked up a couple apartments in Prague in order to crash out when I'm in town, but also to rent them out and cover rent when I'm here speaking to you guys on a Saturday. So, you know, right now we have an Australian family staying in this apartment right here. I would never be able to afford this apartment, but the additional money that Airbnb brings in helps me break even, basically, and then I have a place to crash when I'm in town. It's absolutely amazing. I don't mean to brag or anything, but these are the kind of places that you guys can stay in. in. And this is where I wrote like 3 or 4 chapters of my book last year. So, you know, it's absolutely amazing. And again, I would never be able to afford this myself, but Airbnb kind of zeroes everything out, and then I have a beautiful place to write a book in a hammock. Now, whether you're staying in a hostel, a hotel, or an Airbnb apartment, keep these factors in mind and really dig into them a little bit. So read between the lines. When you read between the lines on reviews for Airbnb, you can tell if the host is in it for intercultural connection, like if they're going to hold your hand and mark up maps and take you around town and take you out to coffee, or if they're just going to hand you the keys and peace out and they're in it for the money, kind of like I am, honestly. You know, just because for me, I interact with enough people already, so for me, it's about covering the bills, but for a lot of other people, they might like to, you know, actually interact with their guests. And so not one or the other is better or worse than the other, but just figure out what's important to you if you want complete privacy or if you like someone showing you around, and then make your decision off of that. Also think about the actual location. If I'm really on my game, what I'll do is I'll figure out what neighborhood is the coolest or hottest neighborhood to be in, or maybe it has the trendiest nightlife, or maybe it has the museums, whatever I am trying to do in that town, that's what I'll drill down and do my accommodation search to, if that makes sense. That way I'm not commuting into that neighborhood at the beginning of the day and then back out at night. I get to stay right in the middle of the action. So organize your search by neighborhood if you're really on your game. Now, this is our third city, right? So Edinburgh, Amsterdam, Prague. I figured maybe we're getting a little homesick, maybe when we want to call our moms and our friends and loved ones back home. Let's talk about how to call around the world. There's all sorts of apps now that really, that help you call around the world for free, if not very, very cheap. If you're an iPhone family, you can FaceTime each other over Wi-Fi for free. You can call via Skype on Android devices, and I'm sure there's there's just all sorts of apps that really deal with, communication. My dad used to stay in touch with his parents by writing a postcard every day throughout his trip. So if the postcards ever stopped, his parents knew where to start looking for him. So imagine that, and here I can just have a FaceTime call with my cousins or with my mom or dad at any point in time. It's great. My biggest leap forward into the 21st century, personally for me in the last couple of years, is having unlocked my smartphone, and I called up AT&T, asked them to unlock it, and then what that lets me do is plug any SIM card into it so that I can keep my phone as it is right here in Edmonds, as functional as it is here in Edmonds over in Europe. So that way, I can access maps, I can Facebook, I can call, I can make flight reservations all on the fly while I'm out walking around town. Unlocking your phone is different than jailbreaking. Don't worry about jailbreaking. Just ask your carrier to unlock your phone, which means you can plug in any other carrier SIM card in it, and that's a good way to stay in touch while you're on the road. So let's make moves over to Italy, eternal city of Rome, the Colosseum, the Vatican, of course, and of course the land of gelato. Now, here's the most important lesson that you're going to pick up in this talk, how to pick the right gelato, okay? Let's think about, as you're walking around in the streets of Italy, whether it's Rome or Florence or Venice or any other city, it doesn't matter, you got to be looking for 2 flavors, and those 2 flavors are banana and pistachio. You don't need to order them, you just need to look for them. And you need to go in and see, okay, what color is that banana flavor? Should it be bright yellow? Probably not, right? It should be the color of the inside of the banana, right? The meat of the banana. Same thing with pistachio. Should it be bright green or should it be an earthy greenish color, right? So look for those natural colors. If it's bright yellow for the banana and bright green for the pistachio, keep walking. Because a lot of gelaterias will color their gelato, making it unnatural. But what they'll also do is they'll pile it super high and plug all sorts of memorabilia and other pieces of flair into it to catch the tourist eye. And then what you're looking at is a gelato that's been chemically stabilized to stay that tall. The reason gelato tastes so good is because it's kept warmer than ice cream, the ice cream that we have here, so the flavors are that much more intense. But because of that, what you should always be looking for is a metal bin that you have to look down into rather than a heaping pile of gelato stacked high. So keep that in mind while you travel around Italy. Cool. cool. Now we can all go home now. No, I'm kidding. Just a few more fun tips. So Rome was the city that I studied abroad in. And again, it really helped me, it allowed me to connect with the local culture, and it really opened my eyes to just how rewarding that can be. I absolutely loved making friends, trying out my Italian along the way. And I'd often stay in touch with this guy, Mickey. Mickey owns a student bar and restaurant in Rome, and I'd have coffee and I'd do my homework and practice my Italian at his place after class pretty often. Before long, I became friends with the guy and his wait staff, and he comes to me halfway through the semester and is like, Andy, I have a couple tickets to the Swiss Guard induction ceremony tomorrow afternoon inside the Vatican. Would you like to go? I was like, Mickey, I don't know. I'm kind of a busy guy. But yeah, of course I wanted to go. So the next day I found myself inside the Vatican City at a private event in an interior courtyard. Check this out. So they're like at a private event that I never could have written into my itinerary, but because I made connections with locals, because I put myself out there, you never know what sort of networks you open up beyond this person that you're interacting with directly. So always be that extrovert. Try out your Italian and your local language along the way, and make sure that you're not just being another American surfing between a Starbucks and a Burger King over in Europe. You know, that's the worst thing you could possibly do. Take time to make those connections with locals. Another thing to keep in mind is a lot of people who go over to Europe kind of forget that what makes you, you know, and what I encourage people to do always is bring your hobbies and your passions and your interests with you over to Europe, because what that does is it helps you immediately customize your travel experiences to what gets you excited. For me, I was on the cycling team back at Notre Dame, so I rode for hours and hours and hours through the cornfields of rural Indiana, and so I joined a local cycling club in Rome, and immediately that connected me with people from completely different backgrounds, but who shared the same interest in me, you know, who shared something in common with me. And from there, you have a very easy way of making those connections and building those relationships with people. And there wasn't an American in sight, you know, when I was riding with my new Roman cycling friends. So rewind back to 2005. This is half of my face here, and my best buddy Alex, also an Edmonds guy. And we were doing our backpacking trip to Europe immediately after high school. Well, we were in the south of France, and we realized that the Tour de France, well, we were paying attention to the Tour de France constantly during our trip. This is the 3-week-long cycling race that loops through France each July, which is ongoing now. And we realized that, wow, if we took a 2-day-long detour out of our planned itinerary, we could actually catch a stage of the Tour de France as it went into the French Alps. And so we looked at each other and we were like, we have to make this happen, let's do it. So we got into this French boonies hill town late one night and got up super early the next morning, started hitchhiking up the mountain, and before long we got picked up by 2 crazy Belgians who had already picked up 2 crazy Koreans and then jammed us all into their 4-seater car. And before we knew it, we were going up the side of the French mountain blasting this Belgian folk music. So the amateur cyclists ride the course before the real race comes through that afternoon. Here's the Belgians. Here's the Koreans. Cool. So fast forward to that afternoon, we find a perch from which to watch this festival on wheels come through. This is in 2005, so I apologize about the video quality. Now we're running down to get a front row view of the cyclists as they come straight past us. Keep in mind, we're in the absolute boonies of France, so all the sounds that you hear and the people that you see are there for that same reason. So to be among that energy is really something special. Lands in the blue there.
Let's go, Lance! Let's go!
That was great. So, 2 days out of our trip to see those 2 seconds, and 2 days to catch back up, all for that. And we picked a mountain stage so that we could see the cyclists as they went straight up a mountain, because they go relatively slower than across, a flat stage. And so we would have seen them for half a second then. But I mean, where else but on the side of the Tour de France can you get as excited about seeing men in spandex and shaved legs riding bikes up the mountain as the French grandma next to you? It really brings people together. And again, for me, that's what gets me excited. So whether you guys are into, chess or yoga or music events or crocheting or ventriloquism, whatever it is that you're into, Google the heck out of it and see what's going on in Europe and kind of use those as checkpoints throughout your trip to catch those exciting events. Because they're not going to be necessarily more expensive, but it's really going to add to your experience. So kind of along the same lines, pay attention to local festivals and go there for that reason, or avoid the crowds and the higher prices for that same reason. I've been fortunate enough to be in Rome for the last 5 or 6 Easters with Papa Francesco, and of course the Pope Benedict before him. But it's just absolutely incredible to be among this energy that's there for Pope Francis and of course Easter. We get in we get in line at about 5:30 or 6 in the morning. The gates open at 9:15, and then Mass starts at 10:15. So you can imagine that there's quite a big crowd at all the entry points by the time the gates open. And then once they do, it's one big Catholic bum rush to the seats. You'll have little Peruvian nuns elbowing you out of the way, because they came around, they came around the world just to see their Pope Francis. So Dublin for St. Paddy's. If shenanigans sounds like fun to you, go there for it. If it sounds like a nightmare, avoid it. Don't just arbitrarily show up in a town without doing your research ahead of time is the point, because it can be a lot of fun or it can be an absolute disaster. This is Amsterdam on King's Day. It used to be Queen's Day, now it's King's Day. It's kind of their national day, and it's absolutely hilarious to be there for it. It's at the end of April each year. And I was there setting up for a tour and running a tour the weekend before. And so I was kind of there in the days leading up to it. And over time, a couple years ago, I started seeing a similar thing happen here in Edmonds, where everybody takes duct tape or chairs and kind of marks out their space on the pavement. A couple years ago, I was like, what's going on? And I was like, okay, there's an upcoming event. Well, in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, the entire country, people start duct taping out 10 by 10 foot squares on the pavement. And I was like, what's going to happen? Well, turns out the first half of the day is one big junk sale. So everybody empties out their small apartments and homes, because everything is so miniature sized in Amsterdam, out onto the streets and just tries to sell their junk to each other from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. And then all the families pack up their stuff and get out of the way, and then the whole city just turns into one big orange party. This is the canal, if you guys can see. Everybody here on boats, actually. And then you got the crowds on the side. Everybody's wearing orange, the Dutch national color, and it's just one big party as well. So it's so cool to catch these local festivals, because it really adds a different angle to all these different cities. Venice for Carnevale, the world-famous costume with these beautiful handmade costumes are incredible. We got in these silly string fights with these devil children. I had been to Venice a few times before that, and I've been through since. But for my friends, it was their one chance to experience the city. And so the crowds really changed their experience. Not necessarily for better or for worse, but just, it changed it. And so if you're there deliberately, that's great. But if you're there accidentally, you're paying through the nose for something you obviously didn't go there for. So just consider that as you begin to outline your trip as well. So let's hop across the Mediterranean to Barcelona, one of my favorite cities. I absolutely love this flamenco show at Tarantos. It goes on as a nightly show, and the quality and the consistency of the show that these guys put on is absolutely incredible. It's also home to the Sagrada Familia, which is by far my favorite church in the world. I absolutely love it. For years, I didn't really pay attention to it, and then I started studying it. And this was made by a guy named Antoni Gaudi. He's a very famous kind of Art Nouveau architect, but modernism is what it's called in Barcelona and Catalonia, the region that Barcelona's in. I never really paid attention much to it, but then I understood, then I started researching it, I visited, and I understood why it's so special. Gaudi would create these string wire frames and weight them with lead weights, one on each of the strings, so it'd be hanging down in arch-shaped patterns and structure. And then he would study that with a mirror to see it right side up. And the effect that creates is architecture that looks as if somebody's pulling the church up out of the ground, as if there's gravity has been reversed and there's some pulling up, rather than the heavy, Romanesque or Gothic architecture that historically is so much more popular throughout Europe. So that's one thing that makes it very different, and it's an ongoing construction project. So Gaudi himself started the church in the late 1800s, and he knew that he wasn't going to see the finish of the church, but he knew that he was going to run out of money. And so he started with the most beautiful facade, the Nativity facade, so that he could build that little part and then continue fundraising. And that's a process that's been ongoing even to today, and it should be finished in the next 10, 15 years. Fingers crossed that they actually do. But, much more, exciting and is experiencing a culture through its food. And of course, paella in Barcelona with seafood is unforgettable. And I love to experience the city through its typical food. So seafood paella, we go and have some prosciutto in the market, and of course, wash it down with some delicious fruit juice. It's absolutely incredible. This is churros with Spanish hot chocolate. If you look closely, that's not our hot chocolate. That's literally hot chocolate. See how thick that looks? Again, if I bring my sister in a place like this, we won't leave until she's had 2 or 3. She absolutely loves this stuff. And on my tours, what I do is I like to go and get a plate of fried anchovies. And I'm like, we're not leaving until we finish this, guys. And so people are a little bit hesitant at first, but then they start popping them back like popcorn. And that's another thing with trying local cuisine. Put yourself out of your comfort zone constantly. If you find a restaurant where nobody speaks English and there's not an English menu, that's a good thing. You found a unicorn. Those don't really exist anymore in Europe. So, if you find a place like that, knock yourself out and enjoy it. Actually, on this very tour, my dad and I crossed paths, and so I was leading a tour in Barcelona that weekend, and he was coming through as well. The next stop on this tapas crawl, I was paying the bill, and in the next room, there's my group with my dad, and I hear everybody go, ew. And I rush over and like, what's going on? What just happened, guys? Well, he bought a plate of food, brought it in, had everybody take one and eat it, and then he told everybody what it was. It was a plate of pig ears. And he had everybody eat it before they knew what it was. But I mean, where else but in Barcelona can you try a plate of pig ears? It's just one of those things. Try it and see if you like it. It's cool. So there's cuisine as a way to experience local culture, but I've been geeking out a lot recently and really digging local living culture. I think the living culture of a city is just as important as seeing the Mona Lisa or touring the Vatican museums. I think the living culture, what's going on today in that city, is just as important. And I think that gets a little bit whitewashed. I think it gets forgotten from time to time for a lot of tourists. So I love to keep my eyes open to visual representations of the local living culture. And what that is in Barcelona, these are castellers, human castles. And if you look closely, these are freestanding human castles. And each neighborhood in each city around Catalonia has these teams. And so it encompasses everybody from, big burly men all the way down to elementary level schoolgirls, all working together on a team. And it's so special and cool to experience that and see it and witness it. And the whole thing isn't complete until they send a little girl all the way up to the top to raise her arm to signify the flag on top of the castle. And she's right here. You can see her. And if you can imagine, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers of people all standing on 3 men's shoulders. And so by the end of it, this thing is like quivering in the air. They do fall down sometimes, but it's just so cool to see that. And it's a competition to see who can get higher. So everybody comes into a square and raises these human castles. It's just incredible to see that. But again, one thing that you would never see, here at the Edmonds roundabout. So pay attention to those. Another thing, sardana dances. So in the city with possibly the worst pickpocketing problem in the world, communities come together and put all their bags and valuables and purses in the middle and then dance around it holding hands in a circle. And, again, something really special to behold, because this is a practice and a tradition that really represents the community coming together and looking out for each other. So that's what the sardana dances are, and those happen each Sunday morning in front of churches around town. So it's really cool to see that. When Alex and I came into Spain and hopped off the train back in 2005, after I graduated high school again, there was this huge street festival going on. There were these flags, there were banners, there were balloons, there were water geysers going off. We didn't know what the heck was happening, but we were like, hey, let's just jump into the party and go along with it. And, well, the day that we happened to show up in Spain happened to be the same day that they legalized gay marriage in the summer of 2005. That's another thing with travel, is often the most exciting and unanticipated experiences happen to you. So when you embrace those unexpected experiences with open arms and really join in the party party and just jump in and have a good time. To be there for that momentous step forward in civil liberties was so special. And when you bring that right mindset, you make friends like crazy. And that's exactly what Alex and I did there. So, embrace those unexpected experiences, go along with the flow, and you'll have an absolute blast. So bring that right mindset, and now that you guys know how to get from point A to point B, how to find accommodation, how to stay in touch with loved ones, how to find the happening spots in each town, you're going to have an absolutely amazing trip. So continue to be those ambassadors for positive change as Americans over to Europe, and be European ambassadors when you come back to the States to share with your friends and family. I think that's the even more important and so rewarding and redeeming and worthwhile these days, especially. You're going to have an incredible time, and I think that's what good travel is all about. And I want to say thanks so much, and have a great weekend, guys. Thank you. Please. Thank you.